So today we're going to take a really close look at something huge happening in India's education system. It's called the National Curriculum Framework, or NCF for short. And honestly, it's not just a small tweak, it's a plan to completely remake the entire classroom experience. We're going to follow a student's journey right through it to see what it's all about.
But before we get into the details, let me just ask you this. Think about it. What if school was less about what you know and more about how you think? What if its main goal wasn't just, cramming your head full of facts, but actually changing the way you see and process the world?
Well, that is the big idea right at the heart of this new framework. It's a massive shift, really. We're moving away from just memorizing answers for a test and towards giving students the skills to find their own answers.
All right, let's get into it. So what's the mission here? At its core, the NCF is all about moving away from that old-school rote memorization, just learning things by heart, and focusing instead on the holistic development of every single child.
And when you put the old and new side by side, the difference is, wow, it's pretty stark. The old way was basically a race to finish the textbook, right? Just get through the content. But this new approach, it's all about competency. It's not enough to just recite facts anymore. The real goal is to build critical thinking, to get kids asking questions, and to do it all in a way that actually matches where they are in their own development.
Okay, so let's start our student's journey right at the beginning. We're talking about the foundational stage for kids aged 3 to 8. And the whole idea here is, well, it's simple, but it's also kind of radical. The belief is that education should start with joy, not with stress.
And how do you build that joyful foundation? It all starts with one key thing: play. And look, we're not just talking about recess or free time. Under this new system, play is an actual, honest-to-goodness, core teaching tool. So through really thoughtfully designed play, kids get to explore. Think about it. When a child is playing with local toys, it's not just fun and games. They're practicing motor skills, they're building that crucial hand-eye coordination, and maybe most importantly, they're learning how to work together and collaborate with other kids.
All right, so after play, what's the next big pillar for these early years? It's something we can all relate to, the power of stories.
Of course, stories are great for building vocabulary, but they go so much deeper. They're a vehicle for teaching ethics and cultural values. So, for example, a teacher might read a story like Collie and the Snake, and that story becomes a jumping-off point for a real conversation about friendship, about empathy, helping these little kids connect the dots between the story and their own feelings and their own lives.
Okay, so our student is growing up. Now they're in the middle years, and the focus starts to shift. We're moving from that foundation of joy to something a bit deeper. The big goal now is learning how to learn and really pushing beyond the pages of a textbook.
A huge part of this is building reading skills step by step. So a child starts by just, decoding letters and sounds. Then they become more fluent, where the focus isn't on the words, but on the meaning behind them. But the real goal, the big prize, is getting to stages 3 and 4. That's when a student can actually learn new things just by reading a text, all on their own, and can even start to think critically about the author's perspective.
And this leads us to a really key concept: inquiry-based learning. You can almost think of it as the engine that drives this entire curriculum. It's a total flip of the script. Students aren't just passive listeners anymore. They become active investigators.
Let me give you a perfect example. Imagine a science class. The old way might be to just show kids which objects float and which ones sink. But now, the teacher asks them to predict what will happen first. They have to form a hypothesis, then they test it, and then they talk about why they were right or wrong. See the shift? It's not just what happens anymore, it's why does it happen? And that's a brilliant example of another big idea. Subjects aren't taught in their own little silos anymore. This new curriculum is all about connecting the dots between different fields. So, for instance, a math lesson about patterns and symmetry could use something like Rangoli, a traditional art form. Suddenly, these abstract math concepts become tangible, they become cultural, and you bet they become way more memorable.
All right, fast forward a bit, and our student is now in high school. This is the final stretch, and the focus here is laser sharp. It's all about getting them ready for the real, complex world out there. That means giving them choices, practical skills, and really honing those critical thinking abilities.
So you know those rigid streams we all remember? Science, commerce, arts? Gone. A student can now study physics and music if they want. They're getting introduced to actual vocational skills. And This is so important. The curriculum is actively pushing them to grapple with complex, modern-day issues and to build a really strong moral and ethical compass.
So what does that actually look like in a classroom? Imagine this. A student brings in a newspaper clipping about a mission to Mars. The teacher sees this and poses a question to the whole class. Is a manned mission to Mars important for mankind? This isn't just some textbook exercise, right? This is engaging with a real, complex debate that's happening right now.
And here's the kicker. The goal isn't to arrive at one single right answer. The whole point is the process. Students are pushed to research, to debate, to look at it from all sides. What's the financial cost? How does that weigh against other human needs? What are the ethical questions for the astronauts? What about the environmental impact? It's all on the table.
So, let's just zoom out for a second. We followed our student all the way from joyful, play-based learning as a little kid to these really complex debates in high school. And when you look at the whole journey, you start to see this one single philosophy that ties it all together.
This whole framework, from top to bottom, is designed to build a set of core values. That scientific mindset, that comes from all the inquiry-based learning. Those democratic values like equality and justice, they're being practiced in every single one of those classroom debates. Things like courage and resilience, they're learned in PE. And even cultural values like seva, or service, are woven right into the fabric of school life.
So when you boil it all down, what's the most crucial takeaway? It's this. This massive, ambitious overhaul of education, it's not just about creating smarter students who can ace their exams.
It's about creating better human beings. The ultimate goal is so much bigger. It's about nurturing well-rounded people, People who have the ethical, the emotional, and the intellectual tools they need to go out and make a positive contribution to the world.
And that really just leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. If this vision actually becomes a reality, if we raise an entire generation of kids who are taught to think critically, to act with empathy, and to find joy in learning, just imagine, what kind of future could those students build for all of us?